All right, let's jump straight into this explainer and uncover the hidden truth about money. We're talking about a reality that even university economics textbooks often get entirely backwards. I've been digging into this absolutely fascinating analysis that maps out everything we thought we knew about our financial system. And honestly, the historical reality we're about to explore is going to completely change how you look at the cash in your wallet.
I mean, look at this question right here. It forces us to reevaluate everything we think we know about our own bank accounts and pocket change. So, what actually is money? Most of us just assume it's the physical cash we hold, right? Or the numbers blinking on a screen. We treat it as a total given. But as we're about to see, the true definition is something entirely different. And the confusion surrounding it? Yeah, that is definitely no accident.
To really wrap our heads around our current system, we're going to trace the complete historical map of money, step by step. So we'll start with the myth of barter, look at the era of stones, clay, and agreements, move into the first paper money, hit the 1971 gold shock, and finally, look at how digital money is actually made today.
Starting right off with our first stop, the myth of barter.
So for about 2.5 centuries, textbooks have confidently printed this myth, invented by Adam Smith way back in 1776. He basically claimed that humans bartered before they invented currency. You trade your fish for my bread, it gets too complicated, so we smartly invent money. Makes sense, right? Well, when anthropologists actually went looking for evidence of this, they found absolutely nothing. Anthropologist Humphrey put it plainly: no example of a barter economy has ever been described, not in any culture, not in any era, literally anywhere on this planet. Barter actually only happens as an emergency backup when an existing money system completely collapses. Think Russia in the 90s or Argentina in 2002. It was never the beginning of money, it was just what happened when money disappeared.
So, if not barter, what did come first? Let's get into stones, clay, and agreements.
Let's trace the actual timeline here. Over 5,000 years ago in ancient Mesopotamia, people simply kept track of what they owed each other. In fact, the oldest writing ever discovered wasn't poetry. It was literally a debt record scratched into clay tablets. And this system existed for over 2 millennia. That is an absolutely massive gap in time, before the very first physical coins were ever minted in Lydia, around 2,700 years ago. So the promise came first, the coin came much, much later. And eventually, about 1,000 years ago, convenience just naturally led to paper receipts in China.
This brings us to a really incredible story. The two most famous economists in history, John Maynard Keynes and Milton Friedman, basically agreed on nothing. Yet both of them looked at this tiny Pacific island called Yap in 1903 and concluded the locals there understood money perfectly. See, the people on Yap use these unmovable 4-ton limestone discs as money. You obviously couldn't move these giant stones, but when you bought something, the whole village just agreed that ownership had transferred. And get this, even when one of the stones sank to the absolute bottom of the ocean during a storm, it kept circulating as money. Everyone just agreed the sunken stone still had value. The value was never in the physical object. It was strictly in the human agreement.
Think of money kind of like a ruler that we use to measure value. But here's the catch. Unlike a minute, which is fixed by nature and is always exactly 60 seconds, money is a human agreement, and that means it's subject to silent change. You can plan your whole life around a minute, but because money is just a social agreement, the person holding that ruler can wake up tomorrow and silently shorten the measurement without even telling you.
Which leads us straight into our next era, the first paper money, and the shift from vaults to receipts.
Historically, to stop that ruler from changing, humans used gold as an unfakeable anchor. Tying money to precious metals kept people honest, right? Because you can't just print more gold out of thin air. But let's be real, carrying heavy metal around is exhausting. So, in 17th century London, a new system evolved. You'd store your gold in a goldsmith's vault, you'd get a paper receipt, and people just started trading the receipts to save time. But then, the goldsmiths realized something massive. They noticed that only about 10% of people ever collected their physical gold on any given day. So they started secretly printing extra paper receipts with no actual gold behind them, and lent those out to merchants for interest. They essentially let you carry all the risk, while they created money from absolutely nothing and collected the profit. A real game changer.
Now, instead of shutting down this goldsmith fraud, desperate governments actually copied it. In 1694, King William III desperately needed money for his wars. He looked at the goldsmith's little trick and basically said, "I want that power." So the fraud got a crown placed right on top of it. He created the Bank of England, the mother of all central banks, to create money completely out of thin air, backed by nothing but the crown's promise. And here's the kicker. Almost every central bank on Earth today runs on this exact same system. The measuring stick was now firmly in the hands of the very people who benefited the most from shrinking it.
Fast forward a few centuries, and we hit a major turning point, the 1971 gold shock, where the anchor gets completely severed. Let's jump to 1944. The world was exhausted from financial chaos, so the West tried to restore order. They did this by tying all currencies to the US dollar and tying the dollar directly to an honest anchor, gold, at $35 an ounce. And for a while, it worked. Europe rebuilt. But in the 1960s, America secretly printed excess dollars to fund wars and domestic programs. The paper dollars were piling up, but the gold in the vault? It definitely wasn't. Countries like France started calling the bluff and demanding their physical gold back. This forced President Nixon to go on national TV on a Sunday evening in August 1971 and entirely sever the dollar's physical anchor to gold. Just like that, overnight, every currency in the world became just paper, backed by nothing but trust.
To put that into perspective, if you had a $100 bill in your pocket that Sunday night in 1971, today it would only buy you about $8 worth of goods. That means 92% of its purchasing power just vanished, while the number on the paper stayed exactly the same. Sit with that for a second. The ruler has been drastically shortened. The 100 on the note looks exactly like it did half a century ago, but nearly all of its actual value has been secretly drained right out of it.
You'd think someone would have fixed this in the last 50 years, right? Well, let's look at how digital money is actually made today. The modern reality is honestly even stranger. The system didn't revert to honest money. It just completely digitized the goldsmith's trick. Today, an astounding 97% of all money is completely digital, and it's created by private commercial banks. This fundamentally shatters that textbook myth that banks just take one person's deposits and lend them out to someone else. That's just not how it works.
Imagine you walk into a local bank to get a loan. They aren't lending you someone else's savings. No way. The very second you sign a $10,000 contract, your signature legally allows the bank to literally type that new money into existence. They record your promise to repay as an asset on their books, and a bank employee just types $10,000 into your account. Poof! New money is born, completely out of thin air.
And this reveals a fascinating, yet kind of terrifying, systemic design. Just think about the math here for a moment. You borrowed $10,000, but you owe back, say, $11,000 with interest. The bank created the principal loan amount digitally, but that extra $1,000 for the interest? That was never typed into existence. It literally does not exist in the system yet. So because repayment is mathematically impossible without constant new borrowing, the only way society can ever pay its collective debts is if someone else is constantly taking on new debt, forever, just to keep the whole machine from collapsing.
This brings us to inflation. Central banks intentionally target a 2% annual inflation rate, and they call it price stability. But because the system requires endless new money creation just to service the existing debt, each dollar naturally buys a little less than it did the day before. If you compound this 2% target over a lifetime, it cuts the value of your savings in half every 35 years. They might call it stability, but it mathematically ensures the ruler is being shortened on purpose every single year.
We really have to look at this objectively. This shrinking ruler is not an accident. Economically speaking, it serves a very specific systemic purpose. It quietly inflates away massive government debts over decades, basically at the expense of the saver. Think about it. Inflation is absolutely fantastic if you're a borrower. You borrow when the currency is strong, and you pay it back decades later when the currency is weak. And the biggest borrowers on Earth? Governments. Their debts are so massively large they could never realistically be paid back through direct taxes. So by shrinking the measuring stick quietly over time, that debt is just transferred away from their balance sheets.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, you really have to ask yourself how you're going to navigate a financial world where the measuring stick is purposely designed to get shorter every single year. If the very mechanics of our money mandate that purchasing power must constantly be drained just to keep the debt machine moving, it entirely changes the definition of risk. It leaves us with a truly vital question. Are you prepared for a system that actively punishes the saver?